Hey there troops, it's me TheTacticalBrit, and something you guys have been asking me a lot of questions about is how exactly do you survive squads in Battlefield 5 Firestorm? Now, a lot of you have played solos, and I'm sure solos is a very interesting experience in terms of how you play against enemy players, how your engagements pan out, and more importantly, the quantity of players in any given region. Of course, when you're playing solos, there are 64 separate entities that can land in various locations, but in squads, you've got multiple squads of 4, which means that there are in fact less entities landing in locations, but there are more of them in any given location. Now today I want to talk about how exactly you should play squads differently in order to be successful. Now also I want to mention that this video today is brought to you by Nvidia RTX. I was lucky enough to be sent a Founders Edition card by the guys over at Nvidia, and today we're avoiding the shiny wonderful RTX graphics and trying to push the highest FPS possible in Firestorm. So talking about Battlefield 5 Firestorm squads, what is it that you need to do differently in terms of the base game and in terms of solo that collectively makes your job a lot easier? Now the answer to that is focusing on collective ability as opposed to individual ability. I can safely say at the moment that in Firestorm I average out at around about 8 or 9 kills, but it's only the games where my squad mates do better or equally as well or nearly as well where we actually win. You know, if you're getting 8 or 9 kills, that's great, but if the other 3 squad mates you have are only getting 0 or 1, it's not going to work in your favour. And this all has to do with the pack mentality of squads in any given, Royale game, let alone just Firestorm, and how that plays into your engagements and how that plays into how well you will win your engagements. And I want to talk about this because it's quite important that there is a distinction and an understanding of why squads is different in terms of how people fight and why those fights come about. Now, in Battlefield 5 Firestorm, when you're playing in a squad, you have 4 active members potentially who can all pinpoint positions where people are fighting or gunshots have been heard or enemies are being hurt. So let's say, for example, if each of your squad mates have 50 meters between them, you're covering a really large visual and audible range that will allow you to understand where enemies are. And, my pro tip really is that if you're playing in squads, you want people reasonably spread out, but you definitely want them close together. I'd say 50 to 25 meter splits between your squads is definitely a safe place to be, but I wouldn't recommend, sending your squad mates off into the abyss because that's when they get executed with no hope of return. Now, because you have this large audible and visual range, whenever somebody fires a gunshot, whenever somebody ruffles a bush, whenever somebody moves a tank, whenever somebody does anything in this game, the likelihood is that you will hear or see it if they are very close to you or within your proximity. So when you're moving as a squad, it's important to understand that you should be making as little noise as humanly possible, namely that you should be crouch running, you should not be firing any bullets, you should be avoiding, sprinting and stuff like that that will get you in a lot of attention, but also things like, firing flare guns and using equipment. Stuff like that can make a lot of noise, and, naturally, stuff like that will allow you to detect other squads nearby. So it's really important that you know that every given individual action you take, whether it's shooting at somebody who is far away, or, shooting anything or firing anything, is going to attract attention in this game. If you're calling in a supply drop, if you're calling in a vehicle drop, or if you're shooting somebody who is very, very far away, it doesn't matter because, to you it may just seem like some drop that's coming in or, some bullet that's probably not going to hit them and they probably won't engage you. But to the surrounding world around you within 200 to 300 meters, everybody knows where you are and everybody knows what you've just done, and the most intelligent of players will know that you're preoccupied with something else and utilize it as an opportunity to take you on. And that's exactly the situations you're seeing with objective flags and vehicle breakouts. But just on an individual, day-to-day, action-to-action basis in Firestorm, that kind of engagement is still the same thing. People will take the opportunity when they see you doing something else, or see you engaging with somebody, or see you involved in anything else that isn't actively looking for other squads. They will use it as an opportunity to fight you, or use it as an opportunity to get a cheap kill, or take out a squad relatively easily. So having that audible and visual awareness is incredibly important. But once those engagements begin, what makes squads different is down to the fact that you have 4 components that changes the dynamic of a Royale engagement, especially in terms of comparing squads and solos. Because in solos, people are very conservative. They sit back, they avoid conflict where they can, and they pick their engagements and choose them very carefully, especially when they feel as though they have the drop on somebody. But in terms of squads, it is a mesh of 4 players versus 4 players, and I have to say this to you, it's a bit like Apex Legends in the sense that, you know, 4 players fighting 3 players will normally win because 4 players should be able to outgun them. You should be able to get the suppressive fire, you should be able to use explosive ordnance, and you should be able to use every single bullet at your capability to outplay these people. But the thing is, and what I notice very well in Firestorm, especially in squads, is that the mantra of how players interact with each other has changed. Because in squads, everybody's confident. It's like, oh yeah, you know, I got 3 guys around me, it's fine, let me just blow this guy's head off. And that is what happens. People play overly aggressively, and people play very aggressively and try to take on fights as much as they can. And what you'll notice in these situations, in most Firestorm engagements, is squads become very quickly separated and become very easily broken apart. And because of that, what I'd recommend is having dedicated flanking players. Now, the way that these engagements work is that you'll have a group of people and a group of people, and the likelihood is that they'll start opening up on each other as collectives. When you start shooting at a squad, you're focusing on a general direction. You're focusing on maybe a 30 to 40 degree angle where you know the players are coming from. Now, if somebody decides to flank around the edge with another friend and just absolutely shreds through you whilst you're not looking, then the likelihood is that you will lose that engagement because most players are focusing on those angles. And if you're attacking somebody, that's exactly what you should be doing. You know, people focus in squads because they act so aggressively that they always focus on the given direction that they first seen the squad and first seen them engage with. If you flank around them, or if you get dedicated flanking players to counteract this aggressive playstyle, or more importantly, just put them off, you'll likely find that you will win that engagement. And more importantly, with this separation, because squads play so aggressively, you know, squads get frightened very easily. If you throw in some explosives or you take down 1 or 2 players, it changes it. It's almost like a psychological battle in the sense that a squad will start off very aggressively, but if they find that they've been counteracted or somebody's flanked them or if somebody has downed 1 or 2 players, it becomes a very much, you know, it comes from me being the absolute boss to me, you know, cowering in fear that I'm about to lose this engagement and I'm going to see all my guys die. And that's exactly what happens in these situations. And it's really about asserting dominance in the sense that you are a more controlled squad, you aren't separating too heavily, you have dedicated flanking players who will do damage, and you have players who know what their roles are. And if you can take on that kind of mentality, keep your squad together and make sure that players are playing to certain roles, like certain people are flanking but certain people are maintaining fire from a position, then most of these situations play out towards you. In my given games, I tend to have 3 guys who all focus on, you know, sniping opponents, laying down suppressive fire, doing what they can to try and take out some armor or take out some health. And me personally, I'm the guy who runs off into the distance, gets behind these guys and tries to execute them. And that is what I'd overly suggest to most of you guys here, is having those confined roles and making sure you understand that, you know, putting your print on an engagement and playing aggressively, asserting dominance in a situation is what really wins these squads battles. So troops, that's it from me today, the Tactical Brit. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you again soon in another video.